Do you want to make tech person the co-host? Yes, I do. Okay, is everybody ready? Back there, Asher, are you ready? He thinks so. Okay. Okay, well, I want to welcome everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We have a nice little group here, a nice little group on Zoom. I'd like to start with the candle blessing. So I'm going to call up Lori Magnus, and it's on page 120 and 2. So if you have the thinner book, which you both have, it's on page 2. The thinner books have bracketed numbers. So it's also the same number as the fat book, but it gets very confusing. So page 120 in the fat book and 2 in the little one.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness.
It's on, but not.
I hear something.
Okay, you know what? I'll give you another book. I should.
We can hear on Zoom.
That's what it sounds. What? Okay, a sound check means checking to make sure the mics are working. Okay, so let's use my mic. Excuse me for laughing.
There's another mic here.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold us, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, and we are going to continue with the Kiddush, which is on page 123 and 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereshit. Ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim. Ki vanu barchata, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, ve'shabbat Shecha ve'ahava tzon in kalotanu, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. Amen.
I am. So this is a meditation at night by Alden Solovey. God of mystery, thank you for the gift of this day, for the one ending and the one about to begin. Help me to see the moments and the hours, those already past and those to come, as blessings, as teachers. Guide me to service for your name's sake. Grant me comfort and rest so that I enter the new day with a sense of joy, hope, and peace. Then, God of old, I will become a source of love, a beacon of wonder, awe, and grace. We continue with Hine Matov, how good it is to sit together, page 128 and 10. Please join us.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, לה 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 la 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 הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד.
I know you're all smiling behind those masks because we're very happy to be together. So this week's Torah portion is called Ekev, and it includes the Birkat Hamazon, the blessing that we say after meals. As Nachmanides, a 13th century Spanish rabbi, explains, our tradition developed an antidote to the natural arrogance that may arise from living in abundance, namely the Birkat Hamazon. This blessing of sustenance was viewed as a daily shield that helped guard us against forgetting the past, self-satisfaction, and haughtiness. Since Talmudic times, the grace after meals was comprised of 4 blessings: to thank God for creation, express gratitude for the land of Israel, redemption, the covenant, and the Torah. Request God's mercy and the restoration of Israel, and ask for the fulfillment of specific desires while expressing gratitude for God's goodness. And Ilu Duvarim, these are the things for which there is no measure, meaning we can be completely generous in doing these things. Elliot wrote the piece, it's page 206 and 88.
אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, 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 כיבוד אב ואם וגמילות חסדים, והשכמה בית המדרש, שחרית והבית, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור. אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים להם שם שיעור, והכנסת אורחים וביקור חולים, והכנסת כלה ולוויית המת, ועיון תפילה ואהבת שלום, בית אדם לחברות, ותלמוד תורה, ותלמוד תורה, כנגד כולם. אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור.
So this week's Torah portion also includes this passage. And now, O Israel, what does Adonai your God demand of you? Only this, to revere Adonai your God, to walk only in God's paths, to love God, and to serve Adonai your God with all your heart and soul, keeping Adonai's commandments and laws. Carol Ox explains this suggests that walking in God's path is precisely what will bring about the feeling of loving God. Love has always been known to give meaning and value to our lives, but also to be the most difficult concept to describe or explain. Love in Judaism is not some vague, amorphous term, but is thoroughly described in terms of how we should live. That is, we are supposed to follow the laws and rituals given at Sinai. And indeed, love is behavioral. We as people who are potentially capable of loving have become actual lovers by responding to the love that has been given to us. B'Chatzi Kaddish is page 263 and 145.
יתגדל ויתגדל שמי רבה, ועלמד יברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביום מכון, ובחיי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה בגלה, ובזמן חריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, יתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל, ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעמה, ואמרו אמן.
We rise to the Baruch Hu on the next page, the call to worship.
Is this on? Asher? Air.
Please be seated. And as I've mentioned, the first blessing before the Shema is a blessing about creation. And we're amazed at all the incredible things that God has created. If you've seen any of the pictures of the new telescope, it's pretty amazing. We're looking at the beginning of the universe. So Alden Solovey wrote a piece, and it's called A Mountain Prayer at Twilight. This splendor, this yearning of cliffs and crests, this longing of ridges and heights, this hint of eternity, this poetry in rock stretches from horizon to horizon, beyond the limits of this world. Power, thunder, silence. How glorious are the peaks at dusk, how majestic at twilight. The Hafot Harim Lo, the heights of the mountains are God's. I just want to do God's will. God has allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. He Harim Rakadu Chelim, Gavaot Kivnei Tzon. The mountains skipped like rams, the hills like young sheep. This beauty, this echo of infinity, this music of transcendence, this steadfast power summons us home. Milifnei Adon Huli Aretz, tremble earth at the presence of God. This twilight, let it be for shelter. This coming daybreak, let it be for hope, for renewal, and for dedication. Yis'u harim shalom la'am, u gavaot bitzadakah. Let the mountains bear peace to the people, and the hills through righteousness. And we continue with the blessing of God's love through Torah. revelation. God revealed God's Torah to us as an act of love, and that's page 266 and 148.
אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו וקומנו נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, נגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תשים ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Before we rise for the Shema that we've been doing almost every single week is written by a composer named Tziva Pick. Has anybody heard about him? So we discovered, unfortunately, he passed away this past week, and we discovered that he was some sort of an Israeli rock star. Yeah, who knew, right? You didn't know that, did you?
I didn't know that, but he also wrote the Shehechiyot we do sometimes.
He does a Shechachiyanu,
Yeah.
and then apparently, I think the first time he published his Shema, and recorded it, he had his whole body painted in sort of a silver gray, and that was the cover of the album. So it's sort of, wow, that's who who knew, right? But he wrote some great music, and so we dedicate this Shema tonight to him. So please rise for the Shema, which is on page 267 and 149.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please be seated, and please join Elliot in the Ve'ahavta, which is on the next page.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבביך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושינתם לבניך ודיברתם בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וכשאתה מלאות הידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת.
So our Torah portion also contains the following verse. It's called, "Cut away therefore the thickening about your hearts and stiffen your necks no more." Do you know Israelites and Jews are sort of a stiff-necked people? And the idea is to cut away the thickening of your heart, the way you would do a kind of brit milah, a circumcision, to circumcise your heart and allow God in. And this is called callus, and it's by Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt. But these calluses are hard won. They protect me from the places where the world rubs me raw. Without my shrug, my humor, my insistence that this too shall pass, I'll feel exposed, my heart pumping where any stranger could see me. Couldn't you ask for something easy? Once I open my locked chest, what if I just fly apart? Michamocha, the song we sang when we were liberated from slavery in Egypt, is page 270 and 152.
מי כמוך, האלים אדוני, מי כמוך, האלים אדוני, מי כמוך, נהדר בר קודש, נורת תהילות, אוסף אל נורת תהילות, אוסף אל, מי כמוך, האלים אדוני, מי כמוך, האלים אדוני, מי כמוך, האלים אדוני, מלכותך רבה ובניך, זה לי, אנו ועמדו. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
So our portion opens with a detailed description of the reward that anyone who scrupulously observes the mitzvot can expect. We'll talk more about that later. So what are the rewards? Fecundity and blessing to the person and their possessions. According to Rabbi David Goodman, this continues the theme of the final verses of last week's portion. Know that Adonai your God is a faithful God who keeps his covenant with his devotees and those who fulfill his mitzvot for 1,000 generations. God's faithfulness and reliability, these are the basis of the idea that the relationship between humans and God is predicated on the mutual commitment of both sides to the covenant. The many promises at the beginning of this Torah portion are meaningless without that mutual trust. But beyond that, the great material rewards promised are actually secondary to the trust that is revealed by maintaining the covenant. As I said, we'll talk more about that in a bit. The Shamru, we are so lucky to have Shabbat, a day of rest and renewal. We're meant to guard it and keep it and observe it, and it's on page 272 and 154.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים, את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם.
We rise for the tefillah, which is on page 273 and 154. If you have the thin book, it's 154. I know it's very confusing if you have a book with two sets of numbers. It's very annoying. Did you find it? Okay, good.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, ve'Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Chasdei Avot ve'imahot, U'mevi Geula libnei b'nehem, Leman Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozeh u'Mashiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye hakol ata, Rab lehoshia. Mecharkel chayim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim ve'rofeh cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, mi chamocha ba'el geburot, umidom elach, melech memit umchaye, umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman ata lehachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, mechaye hakol. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום והללוך סלה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
So please continue silently to page 285 or 167, and please be seated when you're done. We continue with Oseh Shalom, a prayer for peace, page 285 and 167.
Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
We take a moment now to think of those in need of healing, whether of body, of mind, or of spirit. We think of congregants and friends and family of congregants, Jonathan Davidson, Ben Henderson, Kara Gilman, Rabbi Steve Robbins, Gloria Mangus, Leslie Ferris, Pamela Mangus, Johnny Sikat, Larry Miller, Martha Miller, Judy Richmond, Fernando Guerrero, Alan Edelman, Cordell Thomas, Ocean Joy Pace. Would anyone like to add a name? Please do so as I look around. On Zoom. Okay. Let's see. Robin Kurland, Salman Rushdie, Amy Morton, Stephanie Soloway, Stephen Gordon, Rachel and Sarah Heslin, Alan Hurwitz, Irv Richards, Ron Jones, Ron Brazil, Jess Landis, Sylvia Schmidt, Mona Asan Heredia, and please join us in the prayer for healing, the Mishaberach, a different version from what we normally do.
משברך אבותינו מכל הברכה לאמותינו. משברך אמותינו מכל הברכה לאבותינו. מכל הברכה לאבותינו. ישלח בחרך הצלחה בכל מעשה ידיך ונאמר ישלח רפואה שלמה עם כל חולי ישראל מי שברך אבותינו מכל הברכה לאמותינו. מי שברך אמותינו מכל הברכה לאבותינו. מכל הברכה לאבותינו. אמן.
So if you faithfully obey the commandments I'm giving you today, to love Adonai your God and to serve God with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rains, so that you may gather in your grain, new wine, and olive oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. Be careful, or you will be enticed to turn away and worship other gods and bow down to them. Then God's anger will burn against you, and God will shut up the heavens so that it will not rain on the ground, and the ground will not produce any yield, and you will soon perish from the good land that Adonai is giving you. Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you rise up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land which Adonai swore to your forefathers. Do these words sound familiar? Kind of? What does it sound like? Partially like the Ve'ahavta, but not entirely, right? So it's a little bit like the Ve'ahavta, but it's not quite. It's actually a portion from this week's Torah portion, and it's the second paragraph of the Shema. The first paragraph is the Ve'ahavta, and this is the second paragraph. But it doesn't sound entirely familiar. Do you know why? Because the Reform movement took it out. Now, why did they take it out? Any guesses? Go ahead. Yeah, you back there. Yeah, it doesn't sound like something you really want to say twice a day. It's not very cozy, right? So here's what Rabbi Richard Sarason said about why it was deleted. It was apparently deleted in the early Reform prayer books, but the more radical ones, okay, from the mid-19th century. And this is what he said: the deletion was justified in terms of both length and theology. One of the things the Reform movement did was to try to make the services shorter. That was really important. But the theology is very disturbing, right? If you're not good, I'm going to starve you to death and that kind of thing. In order to shorten the worship service on the theory that less is more, repetitions were omitted. So you did hear the repetition that was part of the Ve'ahavta. Thus, the second paragraph, which contains much of the same language as the first, was deemed redundant. But there was also the theological problem with the second paragraph. It affirms that God rewards the observance of the mitzvot through rainfall in its proper season and punishes violations through drought. We'd all be trembling right now at our punishment, right? To the modern scientific mind, this seemed rather primitive and gross. This is still Rabbi Richard Sarason, both as an account of the weather and as an understanding of divine providence. The early reformers are very, very much into rationality. If it didn't make sense on a rational level, forget it. And we didn't want to believe in this kind of theology that God punishes us this way. Now, earlier drafts of the Mishkan Tefillah prayer book, the one that we use now, which is about 15 years old or so, the early drafts actually included that paragraph in smaller print. It's kind of the way certain things in the Torah that are disturbing are sort of whispered in, Orthodox settings, like, these are bad, so let's just, or in Reform settings, they were just left out altogether, some of the passages in the Torah. But anyway, so in the earlier versions of the Mishkan Tefillah, they were included. But this engendered fierce debate. And in the end, that paragraph was removed. And Rabbi Sarason explains, the paragraph ultimately remains sufficiently problematic to require both a recommendation from the Siddur, the prayer book editorial committee, and a vote by the CCAR, which is my organization of rabbis, by the CCAR executive committee. Both decided to uphold the earlier Reform deletion of the paragraph in its entirety, even though subject to mitigating non-literalist interpretations. The text itself remains difficult for a modern Jew to recite in the liturgy. So what are the mitigating non-literalist interpretations? Well, How about the effect that we have on the environment? If we don't obey God's command to respect the earth, we won't necessarily be punished by God, but we will certainly reap the consequences. Hello, we're here, right? We have not been respectful of the earth. It's burning up, it's flooding, on and on. So right here, right now, with floods and fires and drought and diseases, we are suffering the consequences. Now, interestingly, I looked at the High Holiday books, which were edited by different people and are a little bit newer. As far as I can tell, Rosh Hashanah does not have this paragraph, but in Yom Kippur, in one service, it's in there in English as an afterthought, and in another one, it's in Hebrew, and they're both like additional readings. They're not really part of the Shema, so it's sort of like, it's kind of in there, but not really. Now, if you were making the decision, would you include it in the prayer book? How many people would include it? Okay, and the rest would say no? You're non-committal, okay. You would be the Yom Kippur person, yeah? Okay, so just to repeat, for those on Zoom who can't hear anything unless it's in the microphone. So Jason was saying he likes the idea of having it in Yom Kippur as a way to think about our responsibilities for the future, but wouldn't want to do it every single day. I mean, there are a lot of passages in the Torah that are very problematic. And, my view about what to do is there's three things. One, you problematize it and say, this is a problem. Like we should go in and kill all the Canaanites. Yeah, that's a real problem. Okay. You historicize it. You look at it in terms of the context in which it was written, and you also take it non-literally. So what does it mean to kill Canaanites? It means to kill the idolatry within yourself. And here, this is so perfect for what we're doing to our environment, just perfect. Now, so the language may be harsh, but I think the warning is apropos. If we don't respect the land, it will rebel as it has been. And actually, our Torah portion contains more than one antidote. The first one is taking that paragraph literally, you obey the commandments out of fear. And there are other ways of thinking about it. How about obeying the commandments out of gratitude? Because our Torah portion also contains the command to say thank you after eating our fill. I mentioned earlier the Birkat Hamazon. Here's what it says: you shall eat and you shall bless and you shall be satisfied. And this is the text from which we derive the Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after meals, which we do very rarely here, but we did it when we did our outside service a couple of weeks ago. Rabbi Shefa Gold interprets this blessing as follows: you shall eat, open yourself wide to receive all the goodness and beauty of the world. Take in with pleasure the fullness of its nourishment. You shall bless. When you eat, remember the source of all goodness. Taste God in every bite and acknowledge the gift you are receiving. 3, and you shall be satisfied. Instead of immediately reaching out for more or for what's next, rest consciously in the fullness of this moment, this bite, this morsel of life. Because we're so eager to see, what's the next thing we can conquer, the next thing we can buy, whatever. Just enjoy the moment. And she goes on to elaborate. As you enter the land of your life, a land of fountains and depths, valleys and hills, shopping malls and glossy catalogs, a land of wheat and barley, television commercials and billboards and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a place of comforts and the illusion of security, you are in mortal danger of forgetting where all these gifts come from. It will seem that you made this life for yourself, that you are the creator. Here is the spiritual challenge of Ekev. That's the name of our Torah portion. How do I protect myself from the corrupting power of my own ambition? How do I discern between self-destructive greed and a true healthy appetite for pleasure that allows the blessing of satisfaction to manifest? And I'm actually going to talk a lot more about that at the High Holidays, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So saying a blessing before we do an action, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We say the blessing before we eat. We're supposed to say a blessing before everything we do. And indeed, the rabbis actually tell us we should say 100 blessings a day, which makes us notice all the things that we really have. That can keep us honest, can remind us of the source of these blessings. Perhaps that can help us remember to appreciate and respect these gifts rather than to take them for granted. And that might just allow us to find a way to save our fragile planet. And there's one more way to understand the lesson of our Torah portion. This paragraph that was excised from the Shema offers us a pretty rigid concept of good and evil, of reward and punishment. But Rabbi Audrey Korotkin suggests we look at it in the context of the rest of the Torah portion, which is introduced by Moses' call to the Israelites. So Moses says, "And now, O Israel, what does God demand of you? Only to revere the eternal your God, to walk only in divine paths, to love and to serve the eternal your God with all your heart and soul." And how do we do that? Moses says, "Cut away, therefore, the thickening of your hearts." Talked about that earlier. "And stiffen your necks no more. For the eternal is God supreme, who upholds the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriends the stranger, providing him with food and clothing. You too must befriend the stranger, because you were once strangers in the land of Egypt." So this is the context into which Moses now places the promise of the blessings of rain in its time, and new grain and wine and oil. So perhaps this is not a rigid notion of divine gifts and retribution after all. Perhaps the examples that Moses gives of God's gifts to us are meant to be a metaphor for the gifts that we ought to be giving one another, if we are acting in God's image and following God's examples. Perhaps the reward of goodness comes from the good we do for others, a natural outgrowth of loving and serving God with all our heart and soul, one soul at a time. Remember, love is not a feeling in Judaism. I love you. What does that mean? How are you behaving towards me? That will tell me whether you love me or not. How are you behaving towards other human beings made in God's image? You love God, you better love all these other people there. Upholding the cause of the weak, treating the stranger with respect, giving what we can when we can to people who do not even know, whose lives could be transformed by open hands and hearts. So as we confront climate change more and more every day, I think this Torah portion offers excellent guidance for renewing our planet. Observing God's commandments, which includes respect for God's creation, gratitude for God's bounty, and generosity toward one another. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may that be God's will and our own. We have a few people here who haven't been very often, so I'd like to have you introduce yourselves so we can all get to know you. Hopefully this won't be the only time we see you. I know you two have been here before, but if you would introduce yourselves to them and let them know who you are.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Black.
Hello, I'm Erin Lee. Oh, he's a high school senior. He just started senior year. And he lived in Riverside for, I don't know, five years or so, something like that. Yeah, 6 years, something like that. I'm a veterans counselor, and I also have a professional organizing business. So that's what I do.
Wonderful. I think my niece is trying to do something like that as well. She's in New York, so it makes it a little difficult, but welcome. Okay, and I know you came to our dinner, so if you want to introduce yourself again.
My name is Danielle DeCarlo. I go to RCC right now. No, RCC.
Oh, RCC. Still different.
I graduated from Cal State San Bernardino. Going back for another degree. Early childhood development.
Okay, now I did introduce Benjamin before, but I do want to introduce him again because Benjamin is about to go to the Beit Din and the mikvah next week. I'm a Jew. And what are you up to these days, Benjamin?
Oh, I'm editing all kinds of comedy videos and stuff for different YouTube people. I occasionally get paid too, so that's great.
Amazing. That's great. I know he wants to go into the biz. Juan, we know very well. Juan's moved over to Palm Springs, but I'm glad you came in today. Yeah. And with the Dallas Cowboys?
Cowboys.
Okay. Okay, and do you want to introduce yourselves? And if I know you, I don't recognize you with the mask on, so please excuse me.
Hi, my name is Micah May. I'm just here for my son. He's kind of exploring his spirituality and very interested in Judaism. So I'm just here to support him. And I'm going to hand it off to him.
My name is Alejandro, but you can call me Sasha for short. Alejandro May. You can call me Sasha for short. And I'm just here to explore spirituality and see if this is the right religion for me, and also to see if this will fill a hole. I do not know what this hole is, but could be a lack of knowledge on my spirituality or a lack of friendship, but I hope to find out if this will fill up a hole.
Great, and so a number of people have come here and converted to Judaism. And I have a class that is now on video. So if you're interested in pursuing that further, let me know. I'll be happy to share that with you and have a conversation with you about it, okay? If that's what you're interested in, or just come a few times and see how it feels, okay? You can call the office and, they'll connect you to me, okay? So, because I'm not teaching the class at this point. I'm just sending people to the video and then having them meet with me periodically. So, okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. I want to thank our wonderful music provided by Elliot Levine. And I want to thank Asher for doing a fabulous job back there, Asher. Very good. Yes, yay, Asher. We're very lucky that we have young folks who are able to run the equipment. Yes, even when things don't always work. I have a few announcements, but let me ask, does anybody here have any announcements? Yes, Lori, got to do it into the microphone.
My niece had her baby Monday night. She and her husband are both 33. And so this was very exciting for them. And Miss Adeline weighed 6 pounds, 14 ounces.
Wonderful, wonderful, great. Okay, anybody on Zoom have something that they want to share? Speak now or forever hold your peace. So, Christine Gailey's birthday is coming up on Sunday. Well, happy birthday. And Sherry has a birthday coming up. When's her birthday? The 23rd?
Tuesday.
Happy birthday to everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, Christine is back and her birthday's coming up. So that's great. Pretty soon we'll resume Torah study after the high holidays. Yes, Amy, I have to give you the mic because otherwise they can't hear you on Zoom.
I don't actually have an announcement, but Elliot has one that he could have made a long time ago, which is that he was involved in a recording that won a Grammy.
Hey, Mazel Tov.
It's with the Pacific Symphony, which chorus that I sing with. And 3 years ago, we performed Mahler's Eighth Symphony with the LA Phil and Gustavo Dudamel. It was recorded, and the recording came out last year, and we won the Grammy Award. So now I have less space on my wall because I'm getting my little certificate framed.
Asher, you're getting thank you from Joan Pasternak. So just a few things. This is, a limited time for these things. And of course, now I got to find the paper. I mean, we're going to continue having services at 7. And because of the response that we got a couple of weeks ago, we're going to move our services to 7 o'clock during the year. The first Friday of the month will still be 6:30 because kids, and then high holidays, we're going to leave at 7:30, just people have time to get ready. But yeah, we'll see how that works. Do you know that we used to have services at 8:15? Do you remember that? Oh, my God. And then we'd get out of here at 11. Yeah, I don't know how we did that. Let's see. Oh, on September 3rd is going to be Olivia Sabar's bat mitzvah. So of course you're all invited. First day of religious school is September 11th, but I don't think there are too many people here who have kids to register, but you might want to pass on the word. Our next service, the potluck, is going to be chips and dip. And next week it'll be Jorian Morris and Rena doing music. And as I mentioned to some people when they first came in, we're going to do us in the circle, in the round service. Just, we put in these chairs so that we could move things around. The reason we didn't do it up until now is because we had a church that came in and they used up the whole place, and then it was too complicated to keep. But at the moment, given the fact that we may have a church, we may not, I don't know, we're going to move these things around and try something a little different. Okay. The Aleinu is, would Dan and Leela like to open the ark for the Aleinu? And it's on the inside cover of your prayer book, should be anyway, and we rise. Back inside, yeah. If any book doesn't have it, please bring it up to me later and we'll have it put in.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב תורתו, וידעת היום, והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ, מתחת אין עוד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. By the way, one other thing, don't forget that we have this incredibly interesting concert coming up on September 18th, which is based on high holiday themes. So it's going to be at the Fox, September 18th, 4 o'clock. And on September 1st, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a presentation by the composer to explain how we put this all together. And that'll be on Zoom at 7 o'clock. So, really, this is interesting that we have a symphony premiering here in Riverside.
Rabbi, I just want to add,
Yeah.
Cantor Bob and I had a meeting with him and with Sandy Tarmo, also a Zoom meeting, just talking about it. And he played some excerpts, and just talked about it, from a musician point of view. And it really is really interesting. I was a little skeptical of this kind of thing. I thought, oh, it's just going to be your medley, but it's really a more deep piece, and it's a very good symphony and a good conductor. And the rest of the program, besides this piece, is the second half. The first half is the Gershwin piano concerto in F, and some music by Bernard Herrmann, who wrote some famous Hitchcock movie scores. So it's going to be a really interesting program. I really urge people to consider it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And a lot of us are going, so we'll be there together. So take a moment to think of those who are no longer with us. May their memories be for a blessing. And we offer our condolences to Rachel Heslin on the passing of her husband, Sean Heslin, and also, of course, to her parents, Rick and Sandy Landis. Very tragic, sudden death. Is anyone here in Sheva Shloshim or the first year would like to mention a name? Oops. Trying to get back to Zoom. Come on, come back. Sorry, I hit the wrong button and now, here we go. All right. Ruth Landis, Stan Walkman, Joanne Heslin, first year. Judith Cohen, first year. Elena Archibek Ferris, first year. First year, Ten Sean, Stephen Alexander, Robert Noriega, yard site Debbie Franzman. First year, Phil Bush, Edith Tanizaki. First year, Patty Podnar. First year, Myrna Pavelak and Alan Pasternak. And we're observing yard sites this Shabbat for Emily Budick, Molly Scheinman, Sydney Asher, Ivan Alfervec, Pearl Rollins, Evelyn Glick, Stephen Halbers, Harriet Kaplan, Pearl Vasa Barnett, Aurelin Brutus, Jules Lewis Gilbert, Charlie Woodcock, Carol Henley, Joseph Lippo, Sophia Eisendorf, Edward Exler, Edward Berkovitz. And is there anybody on Zoom? Okay. Clara Goffman, of course. Yes, she just passed away and was buried on Friday. And we think of those who perished in the Holocaust and have no one to say the mourner's Kaddish for them. Please rise and please join me in the mourner's Kaddish, which is page 598. And just have it here. $294. Ikadal v'ikadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach yehute v'yamlich malhute, v'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayede hol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah b'rechu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. Just together we say, amen. By the way, I'd also like to thank our wonderful security person Ezra Greenhouse for keeping us safe tonight. Thank you. And our closing song is Adon Olam, which is on page 625. And $321.
This is an unusual setting of this text. It's a Sephardic version from the Isle of Jerba off Tunisia.
Adon olam asher malach beterem kol yatzir nivra et nasa v'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichotat kol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu chove ve'hu yeh betifara ve'hu echad ve'ein sheni להמשיל לו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצורך לי ביצרה והוא ניסי ואומנוס לי למתקוזי ביום מקרא בידו דוח קידוחי ואת אישן והעירה ועם רוחי גבייתי אדוני לי ולא יירא.
Thank you for a Sephardic tune.
Protective coating. Protective coating.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, we give thanks for God for bread. Our voices rise in song together, as our prayer is humbly said. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Fly across this. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Please join us for our oneg, which is ice cream tonight. And those of you at home, if you want to stay on, please feel free to do so and to chat. And Shabbat Shalom. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, it was actually. You don't think did we leave anything out?
You know, I think part of it is that we often do it. We would like talk a lot.
Oh.
We stretch out songs a lot.
Well, I also do shorter versions of a lot of things.
Right.
Not only Bob, but Morris and other people, they do a lot longer versions that have a lot more repeats.
Yeah.
Hey, Shabbos.